Did put y'all on game. Process and promises. Process and promises. What I mean by process and promises. Most people have a hard time with the process because it's attached to some failed promises, right? Most people have a hard time going through the process because it's attached to failed promises. You understand what I'm saying? See, usually people who are structured or disciplined became that because of somebody's lack of promises, somebody's promises that wasn't fulfilled that created a horrible process for them. So because the promises wasn't fulfilled, the process became something to where they said, well, I have to do it. Because what winds up happening is you live the consequence of somebody's failed promises. And it puts you in a promise and in the process that causes you to wait and make you very impatient. Because when you're dealing with somebody else's promises of what they're going to do, it creates a process for you of waiting and imagination and anticipation. But when the promises is not fulfilled, then now it creates a reality, an urgency. It creates a thing of urgency and has you look at your reality. It eliminates the imagination and has you face the reality. Well, that's where the problem comes in. Most people who are disciplined and structured became that because of somebody else's lack of promises. Somebody did not come through in their promises. Now, how does this usually work? It usually starts in people's childhood. I don't know what the parent is. I don't know your guardian, whatever the case may be. But their process created promises for you that created a process for you of failed promises. You understand what I'm saying? Because of what they had to go through as adults, it created promises for you to get you to, for you to believe in. And usually when a parent says something that becomes law to you, you can trust their word. Well, when they don't come through, guess what it does? It creates a process for you. And when it creates a process for you, it eliminates promises. Now, what it makes you do is not trust nobody, not listen to nobody, not believe in nobody, not want to follow nobody, not want to build with nobody, because it creates a fear factor of overthinking and anxiety and all this, because you have to usually live the results of somebody else's failed promise. Whatever the result was of somebody not coming through for you is what you don't want to deal with again. But what you got to understand about life is those results had to happen so you can stop living on the word of others and create the reality for yourself. You had to have those bumps and bruises. You had to go through those situations. You had to be in your feelings. These promises had to fit. They had to fail you. So because it creates the structure, it creates the discipline. So the reason why most people are very uncomfortable and impatient in the process because it's attached to a promise. But see, here's the key that you don't understand. Somebody's failed promises created a process of you trusting you. God, you, whatever you believe in. If it's both of y'all together, whatever you believe in, I'm not here to take that from you. I'm not here to do that. It's whatever you believe in. What you don't understand is at the big age that you're in right now, you're already living the promises. And you're afraid of the process. You're already living the promises. You're already living the reality of what it is you may want. So the only reason why the process exists is to expose in you what you need to see and be grateful for. See, you don't have to go off nobody else's word no more, because those lack of people showing up for you created a process for you that made you live up to your own promises. Because chances are, when you got in your feelings, you promised that you would never take this from nobody else. You promised that you won't put up with nobody. You start promising yourself stuff when you waited on people and kept getting failed expectations. So now you're living the promises of that process. But the problem is the way you got the process and the way you living the promises is because it came with some form of rejection or abandonment or some form of hurt. So you became this because of the disappointment of somebody's word, the disappointment of somebody's promises. So you had to do this on your own and it made you angry. What you fail to realize is that's how it works. You have to get there in order to become this. Because if you would have lived, if they would have been able to fulfill those promises, can you imagine who you still would have to have in your life? Can you imagine who you still would have to put up with because of what they got going on, what you got to tolerate because of what they got going on, because you're living off somebody else's promises? Can you imagine what the process is going to look like if somebody else was able to live off the promises that they gave you? Can you imagine how they're going to treat you? Can you imagine? See, the people that did come through for you, what did they put you through? Can you imagine what you would have to go through if you had to live off other people's promises and believe them? Can you imagine what that looks like? Can you imagine how hurt you would be? You understand what I'm saying? So, see, here's my reality. I grew up with the same situations, people's promises that created a process for me. And it was a day-to-day process. And every day I had to live a life of every day I had to wait to see if I was going to receive the answer to what I was promised. And it never came through. Then I had to deal with the embarrassment of the promise not being fulfilled. So I had to sit in this disappointment, this hurt, this abandonment, this rejection, this sense of low self-esteem because of what I had to deal with because of somebody's promises did not come through. So guess what it did? It created a reality for me to build myself up in my own promises in anger and rejection and hurt and create a process for me till I understood that I'm already living in the promises and I'm living in God's promises because that's what was there for me. Whatever your belief system is, that's on you. That's not what we're talking about. But you got to understand the reason why the process is such a problem is because you're still living as if you're in the process waiting for a promise. You're already living the promise. You're already living it. Look at your life. Who do you need? Huh? Other than your creator, who can you depend on other than your creator? Who do you need? And if your answer is nobody, who's been there for you? And you say nobody. If I could say, well, who can you count on right now if all hell break loose? And you say nobody, then how the hell are you able to be this stable if you're not living in the promises then? That means you're living in the promises. Because when you was in the process, you guess what you also realized? Nobody was there. That's why you had to do it on your own. Because back in the day, you could have said, oh, this person would be there, and that person would be there, and this person would be there. Well, that story changed now because why? They never came through. Because they created a process of failed promises. And because of the failed promises, it created a process of you answering, solving your own thing the way it was intended to in the first place. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to look like that. You're supposed to fulfill your own promises. That's how it works. It's called a doty. But the problem is you don't understand that you're living in all the promises. You're already moving in abundance. You already live in abundance. You understand what I'm saying? When you start looking at that, then you'll understand what I'm saying. You're already living in abundance. Now, the process to understand the promises is when you go through the process, you have to go through what you go through so you can see what needs to be disciplined. You're already living in the promises, but you have to go through the process to see it. The process was not about you getting a thing. The process was about you seeing what you already have. You're in your big age right now. It's about seeing what you already have. Process promises. The process that you're going through was to show you exactly what needs to be disciplined in you so you can understand that you've already are living in the promises. That's why it's so difficult. So if you could check and say, well, nobody's been there for me, nobody got my back, I had to do this on my own. Well, look at what you got because of that. You're doing better than the people who gave you the promises. You didn't realize that? You're already living in the promises. So the process doesn't matter. The process changes when you realize your equal sign. Abandonment, rejection equals promises because you're going to be that for yourself. You don't like how you have to do it. You have to deal with it through rejection. You got to deal with it through hurt. The problem is your mind has to catch up to the actions of your body. Life is lived forward but understood backwards. Remember that. Life is lived forward but understood backwards. And you're only going through the process of seeing it. But you're already living in the promises. You're already living it. So give yourself grace along the way and understand that this is what you're supposed to do. And the way that it works is when you're going through a process, when you're going through something, right? And you see that there's a process of waiting. The way the mind works is this. It'll show you the lack of right now. For instance, let's say first I want to go to the beach, but I can't go to the beach right now because I have stuff I got to go through first. I got to wait for this. I got to do this and do that, do this, right? And then all of a sudden I'm in my feelings about the process that I would have to go through. Well, guess what I realized? The process is going to be difficult because I come from reality. I come from a reality where the promises never came true. And that's why the process is so difficult. And what the mind would do is it'll show you exactly what your process is and what your waiting game is. And then it'll show you a flash of your past. You're going to always notice this. When you start having issues within yourself or you start talking to yourself about a problem currently, when you're talking about the current problem, A past situation will pop up in your head because that's showing you that that's your root. That's what this is. Everything that you're living is already happening in the now. You're only living programs. You know this. You're only living your programs. You're only living your programs. You're only living old programming. That's all life is. Impress, express. You're expressing your childhood impression. So you're only living programs. What you're going to notice is whatever you're complaining about currently, your mind is going to give you a past thought of something in a memory. What you fail to realize is, or don't understand is, that that's the root of what you're going through today. When you're talking about what you're going through right now, and then your mind starts to backtrack to the past of something that happened in your childhood or something that was said in your childhood, when you get on that frequency of aggravation and hurt and all of this, it's going to go back to the root. Anytime you drop down on the frequency of something that you don't like being uncomfortable or hurting or in your feelings, it's going to take your mind is going to play back the root of this. It's going to give you a random childhood memory that's going to remind you of exactly what you're going through right now. That's what it's here to show you. That needs your attention, not the now, but that memory. And that memory needs to be updated with the now reality. You're already living in the promises. But when you look back like, dang, I got to go through this process again. When was the first time the process was a problem to you? And your mind is going to flash that to you real quick. You understand what I'm saying? Process, promises. The truth is, you don't like the process because you got a problem with the promises. But the truth is also, you're already living in the promises. The process is just to show you that. Love.